Welcome to part 2 of the multiplication of fractions video lessons. In the last video lesson, we talked about the theory of why we multiply numerators and multiply denominators when we multiply fractions. In this video lesson, we're going to now use this algorithm and we're going to talk a little more theory, this time about simplifying fractions and how we simplify and why it works, as well as we'll do maybe 4 or 5 examples of problems you might see in the sprint. So we're going to return to our example we used in the last video, 2/3 times 5/6. Okay, so we multiply numerators. 2 times 5 is 10. We multiply denominators. 3 times 6 is 18. So we have 10/18. So in the last video we simplified this. We said there's a common factor of 2 in 10 and 18. So we divide by 2 in the numerator and the denominator and we get 5/9. Now I'm just going to go into the theory of this a little bit. So 10/18, we say there's a common factor of 2. So 10 is really 5 times 2 and 18 is really 9 times 2. So now we're going to pull this apart. We're going to pull it apart and make it 5/9 times 2 over 2. We're just kind of doing the multiplication algorithm for fractions backwards. Now 2 over 2 is just another way to say 1. So what we really have is 5/9 times 1, which we should know is 5/9, because a number times 1 is always that same number. There's a name for that property. It's called the identity property of multiplication. Okay, so it's called identity because when you multiply by 1, you preserve the identity of the number you're multiplying by. It does not change. Okay, so what you're doing when you're just dividing the numerator and the denominator both by 2 is you're kind of pulling out this 2 over 2, which is 1. So the number does not change because you're just multiplying by 1. So that's what's happening. That's the theory there of why you can multiply numerator and denominator by the same number, because you're just pulling out a 1. And when you're multiplying by 1, same answer. Okay, now we're going to talk about simplifying before you multiply. So up here we multiplied numerators, denominators, got an answer, and then simplified it. But can we multiply, or can we simplify before we multiply? So we're going to take our same problem, 2/3 times 5/6, which we say is 2 times 5 over 3 times 6. Now what we're going to do is we're going to switch the order of these two numerators. We're going to say instead 5 times 2 over 3 times 6. Now why can we say that's the same? It's another property of multiplication. This time it's the commutative property of multiplication. Commutative property of multiplication. And what that property says is that order does not matter when you multiply two numbers together. 2 times 5 is the same thing as 5 times 2. Now you may know that addition is also commutative because order does not matter when you add numbers either. You could say 2 plus 5 is the same as 5 plus 2. Okay, so now we've rewritten the problem as 5 times 2 over 3 times 6. Now we're just going to pull it apart. And we have 5 over 3 times 2 over 6. Now we can see that there's common factors here. There's a common factor of 2 in 2 and 6. So this is really 1/3. So now we have 5 over 1, or 5 times 1, I'm sorry, which is 5, over 3 times 3, which is 9. So we have 5/9. Same answer as we got up there. So now we can even skip a step here. I'll go over here. 2/3 times 5, 6. So I don't need to rewrite this, switching the 5 and the 2. I can think in my head that 2 over 6 is just 1 over 3. It's 1/3. And I know in my head that order doesn't matter here of how I multiply. So now in my head I can just do 1 times 5 is 5, 3 times 3 is 9, 5/9. So what I did here is I just simplified before I multiplied. And you can do that because of this property of the commutative property of multiplication. Okay, so now we're going to use that to do a few sample questions that you might see on the sprint. Okay, let's try a few. 4/5 times 1/7. If this one, if we just do some straight multiplication here, 4 times 1 is 4, 5 times 7 is 35. Our answer is just 4/35. It can't be reduced, and you would enter it as 4/35. Some problems, such as this, 6/7 times 1/6, you could just do that straight multiplication of numerators and denominators, and you'd get 6/42. Hopefully you could reduce that to 1/7. Or you can think in your head here, oh, I have 6 over 6 here, that's just 1 over 1. So I end up with 1 times 1 over 7 times 1, 1/7. So that one should be a pretty easy one to do in your head because you see those 6's right away and you go 6 over 6, that's just 1. Okay, another one, 2/5 times 3/4. And again, you could do straight multiplication, 6 over 20, reduce that in your head, 3 over 10, because you know they're both even, you can divide by 2. Or you can, in your head, think about simplifying this before you multiply. You could say this 2 over 4 is just 1 over 2. And then think 1 times 3 is 3, and 5 times 2 is 10. 3/10. Okay, and one more example here. 4/7 times 3/8. Okay, and again here I think I would try to simplify if I can in my head first. So I see this 4 over 8 and I think 1 over 2. So I would get 3/14. Okay, that should be a pretty good sample of what you're going to see on the sprint. Hopefully these 2 videos have been helpful. Good luck to you on the sprint.